In today's podcast, Barbara and I are going to be talking about how to deal with difficult people at work. I was really inspired by a recent masterclass that Barbara presented, and I was quite taken by the participants' engagement and the stories that they were sharing about their difficulties. It really stopped me in my tracks and made me think about what a struggle it is when you are in a workspace with somebody that is extremely abrasive, irrational, a narcissist, and just plain high conflict and just making your life miserable. So I was inspired to talk a little bit more about this and really draw upon Barbara's work mediation experience and share some tips and tools. If you are in a situation like this, I really want to say sorry. And it is a struggle that we heard about how tough it is. So we're here to offer some relief. And as always, Barbara has incredible resources and information. So let us begin. I am Cecilia Young.
I'm Barbara Clifford.
Yes, let's get started. As I said, I was really inspired by a recent masterclass. And how common is it from your work mediation experience that people go through such struggles and challenges and conflict at work that they need to call you in? How common is it?
It is surprisingly common. And the region that I work in, so I can speak to the area that I work in, it's a small population. And you would think, given it's such a small population, that you wouldn't have the level of conflict there is. But I am always in demand for the mediation that I'm delivering. The conflicts that occur often happen because in this regional space that we live in, there is a labour shortage. And what that then means is that people are moving into positions that they may not be experienced in, may not be qualified in. In Australia, we call this term punching above your weight. Have you heard, do you say that in Canada as well,
No.
Cecilia? So it's basically, if you go into a boxing ring, you're matched by your weight and your expertise. But sometimes you might
Mm,
go into a boxing ring where someone is heavier, more experienced, and that's where you're punching above your weight. So it's
mhm.
a term that we use in Australia to say where you're not skilled or prepared or strong enough to be going into that position. It's often used when men are dating women who are out of their league. That's where Australians tend to use that term, right? So to say he's
Thing
punching a
above your weight.
yeah, right. That's where that's typically used. But
Okay.
what we see in the workplace is that people, especially moving into leadership roles where they have absolutely no training or experience in leadership, but there's misconception. You're incredibly good at that job and doing that work. We're going to make you lead other people doing that work. And it's a totally, as you're aware, Cecilia, it's a totally different kettle of fish. And so what happens is quite often that's at the foundation of, it's one of the things I see in terms of those conflicts. But there's a lot of people that come into really difficult working relationships and incredibly distressed by it. Really, really
Yes.
distressed by the trauma of that person that they think is unpleasant and making their life unpleasant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, we often hear that people don't quit jobs, they quit their boss, and those are the relationships that tend to be more high friction. And that manager, team member, or I really don't like the word subordinate, but that relationship, because there's a power struggle there. And that's where the conflicts start. And there's one person who's locked in and they have to endure, they have to tolerate. Not always the case, but that tends to be the commonality. And I know that you get called in when it gets to a point where there's almost no return and they need to bring in an external third party to come in. But I like to discuss and explore some ways that we can avoid getting to that stage. What are some strategies that you can offer? What are some things to look out for? And what are some of the things that you can mitigate so that it doesn't reach that level?
Oh, it's a great question. And I think there's a few elements that I see, some common factors in all of these conflicts that I'm mediating and this is what I love about mediation because it informs me about the things that you can do to stop these things occurring in the first place. How could we have prevented this train wreck occurring,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Um, so, one of the biggest things that you and I often talk about is curiosity and the power of being curious and applied curiosity. It's really easy when things go wrong or we don't like what someone else is doing to make an assumption about their motivations and their intention. And once we form a belief about somebody's intention, we then seek validation and evidence for why that's true. And you can totally go off track with all of this evidence. So, what that means is, I come into mediation and one person is saying what they believe the other person is doing, what their intention is, what their motivation is, what their belief is. And it's not uncommon for that other person to go, "Oh my goodness, where did that come from? That was never my intention. That is not what I did. I never meant for you to feel that way. I don't feel, for example, that I'm in control. I actually feel completely useless. And that's why I said X, Y, and Z." And then the other person goes, "Oh, wow, I hadn't had no idea that's what was going on for you."
Mhm.
I love it when people can walk out almost holding hands and laughing because they've learned something about the other person that they had no idea of. They just totally misinterpreted their signs and signals. I'll often talk about resting bitch face. Have you heard of that term? Cecilia?
Yes.
Yeah. So where we can look at somebody and go, they're unhappy, they're displeased with me, they're passing judgment, they don't agree with what I've said, but they've just got a neutral face and they're concentrating. But without all those signs and signals, we're interpreting what they're thinking and feeling and what their intention is.
Mhm.
So, adopting a position of curiosity is a way to counteract that. So, to be able to say something, not these exact words, but along the lines of, from my point of view, this is what it's looking like. Can I get some clarity on that? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Why did you decide to do that? Why did you say that? I'm curious.
Mm.
Why are you delivering things that way?
Yes, yes. Well, making assumptions is one thing, and yes, we can be more direct. But what if those actions are very overt? I mean, we heard harrowing stories from that masterclass about how people just really behave badly. And I'm a little shocked, but I have seen it in my career. It's not uncommon. It's just it's just hard to fathom how people could behave so badly in the workplace. What's your take on that?
Well, now, you and I, Cecilia, can use these kind of analogies and stories. We talk about the bully, the narcissist, the psychopath, the micromanager. They're the common kind of terms that people might throw around. If you work with an industrial relations organization, they won't use that language because then you're planting the words into people's mouth and it can be really dangerous. However, the reason you and I, or I in particular, will use some of that language is because it empowers people to go, what am I working with here? So, for example, if someone is a bully, sometimes it comes from a place of laziness where I just don't have the time, the patience. I may be anxious, stressed, fearing control. So I'm just going to push you and disempower you just to get something done, right? I'll just to make something happen quickly, I'm just going to enforce things. And then that becomes consistent behavior, and that's not okay. And under legislation, if it's repeat behavior and you have evidence of repeat behavior, then we're starting to go into a founded case. So, what's really important for individuals, if we ever wanted to take it to a serious investigation or legal action, is we want to have evidence of that. So we want to make a very clear request. Cecilia, please don't call me a grey-haired old bag in the meetings. I find that disrespectful and I feel uncomfortable when you do that. Can I please request that you just call me by my first name? It can be something like that, right? And we want to make those repeated requests. So if they're being ignored and continually ignored, then that's really strong evidence of bullying. However, a good bully will go, sorry about that. It's not okay for me to do that. I will change my ways. And great, we all go off in and work, find ways to work together. But then we have the people who just are missing, it's not on their radar. I say it's like it's a flaw in their makeup. It's like something's missing in their DNA. They just don't have receptors to realize what they are doing. And sometimes their ego takes over. It's all about, I want all the praise, but when things go wrong, it's not me, it's you. You know,
Mm.
that's the narcissistic kind of behavior. Not that I'm a psychologist, a disclaimer with that. So that's
Well, you
harder.
seem to know these personalities really well when you were describing them. And I've had limited exposure. I guess I'm fortunate in that sense, but I've worked with my share of bullies and narcissists and micromanagers. What I have found is that when you are confronting a bully about their behavior, they will push back.
Mm,
They rarely will stop and say, "Oh, yeah, maybe I was acting inappropriately." There's always some someone who's to blame. There is always a fight in there.
mm. And what's really interesting about mediation, what I've learned through that process is I talk to people about meeting on the bridge. It doesn't mean you have to go all the way over to the other person's side and do what they want you to do.
Great metaphor. What a great
Yeah,
metaphor.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's about um yeah, meeting halfway on those things, finding ways to meet halfway. And so to help people get clarity around that, and if you're a person that's listening to this podcast or watching this podcast and you're in this situation, stop and take a moment to think about what is it that I need in order to do my job? What do I want? And what do I need in order for me to do my job and for me to do my job well? And what's getting in the way of that? And if you're in conflict with somebody else, it's something that they're doing that is imposing upon your capacity to do that, to feel good at work, to do your job and to do it well. The top three things that I see in mediation that people come into conflict about is distribution of work. Whose job is it? That's my job. No, that's my job. So people come into conflict about distribution of work, and then they think someone's interfering or whatever. A definition of communication. What's good communication? Some people like to be verbal. Some people feel written. Some people have too much. Some people have not enough. So people have different theories or beliefs about what good professional communication is. And the other one is the interpretation of respect. I always get concerned when I see respect in policies or in theory because it's so open to interpretation. It has such cultural foundation and our own upbringing. We're taught by our parents and our peers and our community and our family about what respect means and how you demonstrate that. So that's why that can come into conflict because people have difference of opinion about what constitutes respect.
Yes, yes. Well, that's why in a lot of policies it's spelled out very clearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
what's really interesting is to respect that some people, ironically using that word, respect that some people will have a different interpretation of what's okay and what's not okay. So, a very classic issue that comes up in a mediation is a joke that didn't land. So,
Mm.
people can say, I didn't intend to be offensive. I didn't intend to be racist. I didn't intend to do these things. That doesn't mean that it's okay. It's how it was felt at the other end. So to be really crass, I could slap somebody's bum on the way through the door as a way of being affectionate. But of course, that's inappropriate in a workplace. That's sexual misconduct. So I could say my intent wasn't to be sexy. I was just being affectionate. Doesn't matter what my intent was, it wasn't okay to do that. And it
Yes,
requires education around that.
yes, yes. I was quite taken during the masterclass when you talked about the right to do your work. Everyone has the right to fulfill their 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 work aspirations. And it is a right to be given the right conditions in order to do your job well. So how what would you speak to somebody who maybe has a very disruptive coworker, somebody who's backstabbing, or somebody who's, we heard from the participants, like someone who's really out for them,
Mm.
negating their work at every turn and really trying to not just be disruptive, but really be beyond disruptive, destructive,
Destructive.
to be
Yeah.
destructive. Yes.
Yeah.
I I think I dealt with someone like this early in my career, or very early in my career when I was in my 20s. And I think I was clueless, and I was a victim, or I was weaker, and I just allowed somebody to dominate and bully me. It wouldn't happen today. I mean, I know better. I can stand up for myself. But this person was clear bent on destroying everything that I did. So how do you deal with that? And it just sounds so movie-ish, like it happens in a movie. It doesn't happen in real life with such a villain in the workplace.
And it's really interesting that you use the term villain because when I was in the masterclass, I was talking about psychopaths, right? And there is a small percentage of people in the workplace that are psychopaths. And what was the character's name from Wall Street again? Greco. What was his name, Cecilia?
Gordon Gecko.
Yeah, where he says greed is good and there's collateral damage, and that's just what you have to do in terms of succeeding. You have to step on people and sacrifice them in order to get success for yourself. There are some people like that, but they're very rare. Most people don't intentionally that's very clear villainous behavior. I'm consciously aware of what I'm doing and I don't care. That's what I'm going to do. But for a lot of people, they're not aware that they're the villain. They think that what they're doing is justified and there's nothing wrong with what they're doing,
Oh
right?
yes. Oh yes. Oh yes.
And so, like you
Have you
said,
heard of the drama triangle?
no, what's
The
the
drama
drama?
the drama triangle is there. It's a triangle. So there are three characters. There's the villain, there's the victim, and there's the hero.
I
So
have,
depending on,
yeah.
yeah, so depending on who you're talking to, they're one of the three. And they'll be
Yes.
very convincing.
Yes, I have heard it. And then there's a theory where you flip the triangle in terms of changing the focus and the language and
Yes.
reframing how you're speaking to them. Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. So if the thing that you're talking about where people are destructive, this is what we would define as, in some instances, the gossiping is a great example. And we talked about that with someone in the masterclass. When someone is gossiping, it is because we want to have a go at the person that's doing something to us, but we don't have the language skills to be able to confront them. So, for example, Cecilia, if I was unhappy with you, and I didn't have the confidence or the communication skills to address what I was displeased about with you, I will go to a whole heap of people and go, "Oh, Cecilia, she's useless, and oh, she did this, and I can't believe she did that, and
Mm,
you know what she did in her last job, and da 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 da." So it's a way of
mm,
me undermining what you're doing because I don't have the confidence to be able or the ability to be able to confront you directly and go, "You know what, Cecilia, I think you can do your job better. That's what I want to
yes.
say to you." Or, "I don't
Yes.
think you're handling this situation really well. So I'm going to complain about it to everybody else," which is destructive.
Yes.
Or undermining the work that you're doing because I think you're not doing it well and it needs to be done better. So I'm going to do something else off to the side to make that happen, which is undoing everything you're doing, rather than just having a conversation with you in a way that's assertive without being aggressive and is emotionally intelligent and applies active listening so that we can have what we call a safe conflict, where I can disagree with you and put forward different ideas. And from that, we create innovative resolution, ideally.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think that's a great way to frame gossip. So when you are engaging in gossip or when you hear it, is because this person is unable to confront the person that they're gossiping about directly.
Mm,
That's an excellent way to frame it. I think I knew it intuitively, but you just really nailed it. This is yeah, very objective way of looking at it. And so, but tell me something though. Why is it that we love hearing gossip? I mean, I will admit it. If somebody is on the side there, I'm curious. I want to hear. I will do my best not to engage in it, but this is human nature. Why is it that we love hearing gossip?
It sells magazines, right? I'm not a psychologist. So, however, I'm just going to give you my opinion. It's a great question. I think my opinion is it gives you a sense of empowerment. So that is why when people feel disempowered and they can't confront the person that they're having issue with, they feel a sense of empowerment to go and gossip about them with someone else. So if we talk about how sorry to do this, but if we talk about how much Jennifer Aniston's love life sucks, we go, oh, well, look how beautiful and gorgeous and famous and talented and gifted she is. I feel better about myself now because she's had a failed relationship. So I feel better. So I like to read about that in a magazine and the gossipy magazine because it makes me feel better and me feel more empowered. So if I can run you down to somebody else, I feel better about myself and my skills and my capability.
Yeah, that's a good assessment. That's a great take on it because then you go into deep psychology about survival and just wanting to be with an elite group and casting out the ones that are weaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that is deep.
Yes, so interesting. So interesting. So, okay, we've determined that gossip is not good. So if you are listening and you are engaging in gossip, note why you are doing it. And could you do it in a different way and actually speak directly to the person that you are having these side conversations about? And what would
Mm,
happen if you practice curiosity?
mm. And there are other ways that we apply passive aggressive behavior is often comes from a place of disempowerment and lacking the capability for those language skills. And we can all fall into that trap. So it is, I want to, for lack of a better word, attack you, but I don't have the skills to do it. So I will do it in a covert way. I'll be passive in how I'm doing it.
Right.
So to give you another example, and this is what in mediation we want to bring that stuff to the surface. A lot of the conflicts is covert and people are picking up on things. Some of them are accurate, a lot of them aren't. And so the sort of things that would be passive aggressive behavior is jokes that are sarcastic, comments or criticisms that aren't clear and directive but are underhanded, rolling eyes, sucking in breath, titching,
Mm.
like, oh, well, and saying things like, what made you think that was a good idea? So it's not a clear directive about a clear question. I was doing some leadership coaching with someone and they didn't like the fact that I was picking up on a lot of their passive aggressive behavior and for me to be able to recognize that they were that was playing a part in the conflict they were having with somebody and they relayed a conversation where both people had an issue about something, but they weren't clearly communicating it. They were just throwing sarcastic comments back and forth, and he was relaying this conversation. And I said, why didn't you just ask this question and say this? And why didn't he just ask this question and say that? Because what you did was passive aggressive, and now you're narky with each other rather than just saying straight out, why did you do this? Why did you say that? I'm concerned about you doing this thing at work. And so they just created this tension and conflict. And that's what we see in mediation.
Oh dear, the thought of that is just so draining. Just even the thought of it. I can't imagine living it because think of how much energy it takes to go to work each day and to have to deal with that. And what can people do to resource themselves and to be able to actually put in a good day's work?
It's a really good point, Cecilia, because what we know, we talk about stress management and resilience as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what I've seen, I did a mediation recently where this conflict had been going on for some time, and I actually say to clients, if you don't do something to address this, your body will. Your body will step in and cause some action. So this in this one mediation, I was seeing this person over a couple of days, and it had been going on for some time, and her skin was broken out, and I said to her, you will get sick if this is not addressed. And she said, yeah, I've got, my mouth is full of ulcers, and she had a cold sore on her lip. Like her body was shutting down from the stress. Her immune system was being compromised because of the stress and the energy that it's taking from her body and her spirit. So I think my advice to her is that, like, the boundaries once again is to be able
Hmm.
to differentiate the feelings from the facts and the actions. And in essence, it's a job. It's just a
Yes.
job, and to differentiate from that. We have family, we have dogs, we have beautiful place homes that we go to, and those are the things that we should recognize and value and treasure, in and recognize that a job is there to serve us. I know for
Hmm.
a lot of people it defines who they are and it becomes our whole identity. But to be able to disassociate from that can help to create those boundaries and the detachment from the whole spirit and energy that you're investing into it.
Yes, and being very disciplined about that. I know it's easier said than done. And it's actually easy to just say, I quit. No job is worth that. And it's sad when that happens because of one personality. You risk your own career or you lose out on a great work opportunity. And I heard some great feedback once from somebody who dealt with a lot of difficult personalities at work, and he said, hey, the difficult ones, they get promoted or they get shipped somewhere else, they get transferred, they don't last forever. So create your endurance and wait it out.
It's a really interesting position, Cecilia, because, and quite often when I'm coaching people that are going through conflicts, what I support them to get clarity around is you need to make a decision. Do you want to fight the fight, or do you want to surrender and move? And there comes a point where it is too taxing on your energy, that it does compromise your well-being. And so you go, is that fight worth the fight? And some people will say yes, and some people will say no. And I've had a mix of both. I couldn't say that there's one stronger than others. For some people, it's about the morals, like is setting a precedent, is ensuring that this doesn't continue, or standing in your own truth. And for others, they go, this isn't worth the energy. It's destroying me. I'm just going to walk away and start afresh and make a choice for my own self and my own well-being. It's not worth the fight.
Yes.
This is a bit of a tragic story, but I will tell you of a client that I was coaching who she came to me for time management and for time management coaching initially. And a lot of people do, because that's systematic of not standing up, not setting boundaries, just keep saying yes and becoming overwhelmed,
Mm.
rather than asserting or saying no and those kind of things. Anyway, so she came to me with time for time management coaching. And it was one of those, this is where I said this saying, you can't put lipstick on a pig and make it look pretty, which is a horrible saying. But the idea is that you only have so much time. The workload exceeds the time you have. There's nothing I can do to make you better at your time management. You just don't have the capabilities. And this was a workplace that was going from bad to worse to terrible, where there
Mm,
was a team of 5 people that had to do work that involved a lot of compliance ticks and balances along the way. And obviously that requires check-ins. And there'd been about 5 people, now down to two and one supervisor. And these 2 people were overloaded, working really hard. And my client just didn't have time to stop and check with the other person to make sure that they were doing their side of the checks and balances. And my client kept trying to raise it with the supervisor to have meetings. They said, we don't have time, we don't have time, suck it up, we're all short staffed, just keep
right.
going. And consequently, some significant issues occurred where the senior management recognized that there was real trouble because compliances hadn't been met.
Yeah.
And so they sacked the supervisor and sacked my client. My client went for unfair dismissal and she was determined to fight that fight. And I thought, good on her for doing that. And so I supported her with that evidence. It kept going and kept going. And I kept saying to her, do you want to fight the fight or do you want to walk away? And she said, I owe it to my, I'll say, clients that she was working with. She was very committed to them and the work she was doing. She said, I want to make sure that I protect them. And so she got sick. She started to get sick through this process. It was going on. And she was getting treatment in and out of hospital. And she said, look, I'm going into hospital for this next round of treatment. We'll kick off the coaching when we come back. And I said, okay, no problem. And about 2 or 3 months go by, and then finally the phone rings. And let's just say her name was Mary. And I answered the phone and said, Mary, great to hear from you. Are you ready to kickstart your coaching again? And the voice on the other end of the phone said, this is Mary's son. I'm just letting you know she's passed away.
Oh, no, that is
And
a tragic story, Barb.
she ended up getting, she had cancer that went into her throat. And for me, the sign was she just didn't have voice. She just
Yes.
didn't have voice. And I worked with her for about 2 years. But that's a really full-on story, but it's not an uncommon one where I've got clients that I see them push themselves until their body steps in and stops them. That's an extreme case, an absolute
Yes.
extreme case. But that's the risk also, I
And
think.
that's a really good moral here. Like, really step back and say, is this fight worth the fight?
Yeah. And sometimes that's the big question, right?
Mhm.
At what cost do you have this fight? And is that cost worth it? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, I'm sad to hear about that. Mary, bless you for
Yeah.
continuing to stand up for yourself. But wow, that is a tragic story.
And what we will see, moving away from that really sad story, but what we can see is that if you don't, now with laws changing around mental injury in the workplace,
Mm.
um, what's really interesting about that is that long-term avoidance of those conflicts and those challenges or the pressures that it puts with on the team can manifest in physical injury in the workplace. So to give you an example, if I'm doing the job of 3 people and I don't have the capacity to push back to the person that's being horrible to me about that, and I keep saying yes and I just keep doing it, I will rush. And if I rush, I could have a physical accident. I could make a mistake with a piece of equipment. I could miss a vital piece of the process that has significant consequence. Or I could do things like not eat, not get enough sleep, not drink water. And doing that long term obviously is going to have physical side effects as well. So these things, that's how and why they occur in the workplace as well.
Well, one thing that I've noticed is that our world tends to reward those who produce, reward those who deliver on performance. And those who deliver on performance tend to get promoted. And those who tend to get promoted do not necessarily have the people skills. They are great at delivering results, but not great at building relationships, building trust. And I think that is one of the reasons we have these situations and why we get called in, because these personalities, and I don't want to stereotype either. If you're a great performer, it doesn't mean that you are a bully, but there are some patterns here, and those are the personalities that tend to be rude or create a hostile workplace with bullying tendencies. So I guess what I'm making with my point is we do have legislation in place. There's just so much more awareness and so many more resources that people can access, but it still exists in the workplace. What are some of your suggestions on what we can do to overcome this? To overcome this pathological, way of working.
So it's interesting. I can't remember the name of the man, but there's a TED talk, and what I'll do is pop it in the notes of the podcast. But there's a great TED talk by a workplace psychologist who recognized there's evidence and data that shows we reward busyness. So if you ask someone, oh, how's work going? Or how's your business? Oh, I'm just so busy. But we don't necessarily look at the efficiency or the output. So somebody could be really, really busy, but not actually achieving anything, yet they get promoted or rewarded because they're really, really busy. And we see that too sometimes in workplaces where the person some people can be busy, but some people can be efficient. And the efficient person gets loaded with things because the busy person just spins wheels, if that makes sense. So that person that's efficient goes, why does it always fall back on me? Why can't you improve the skills of the busy person that's not actually doing anything? In terms of accessing the tools and the resource, it always comes for me, it always comes down to data and the evidence. It always comes down to what you can document and what you can show. So, for example, if you go to a senior manager and say, I don't have enough time to do this, they will immediately respond, we'll manage your time better. Or if I'm feeling stressed, well, you need to be more resilient. So we need to provide evidence of where things are falling short in order to be able to be solution orientated. So we need to be able to say, this is the problem, here's the story and the narrative or the evidence of that problem, and this is what needs to be done to mitigate that issue. Otherwise, all leaders just want you to solve the problem for them. That's an ideal world. So you come to them with something. Otherwise, they go, oh, it's just too hard. Can you go off and fix it? Because they've got their own traumas and things to deal with. So that's one strategy in terms of looking at what tools and resources exist within the workplace to find that data. I do a lot of that with people in terms of emails and whatever. But the other thing is that the other trap that people fall into is that they feel that they are bound to the HR department. And the HR department ends up becoming the gatekeeper, which is really difficult. Sometimes it is the leadership that's fueling the problem, or the systems or the strategies or the promises that haven't been fulfilled, and HR has to clean up the mess. So what the employee can do is look outside of the organization and the department to see what the legislation is, what the policies and procedures are, what the rights and regulations are within that industry or that field, and use that, again, the data and the information to support the argument. The HR team, what they need to do to be able to mitigate these challenges is, again, look at what the leadership is doing to fuel the problem and empower the HR team to support better leadership and make changes. So to give you an example, I read a really interesting article about talking about the mistakes that people make with demotivated staff. When your staff aren't motivated, trying to fix that, band-aid
Mhm.
fix that with things like commissions and incentives and praising people, giving everyone an applause at team meetings. But what they're not necessarily disengaged, they're disempowered. And what that means is that for a lot of them, they're going, I had dreams and visions and promises that have not been fulfilled.
Hmm.
I wanted to have this responsibility in this job and I haven't been given it. I wanted to make an impact, but I haven't been given the tools and the structure to do it.
Right.
You said that this was going to happen and it hasn't. And that's why people are disengaged, is the leadership that hasn't created, fulfilled on those strategic promises potentially, which I
Mm.
thought is
It's
so
those human
interesting.
skills that we've been talking about, those vital human skills that always, in from my experience, get pushed back. So there are so many other training programs that are more important, especially when business cycles are not up to standard or have not met expectations. There isn't a focus on what are the soft skills in leadership. How do you motivate? How do you inspire? How do you build trust? How do you ensure their psychological safety? It's always not seen as a priority. That's from my personal experience, but I have one point that I wanted to make, which was quite interesting in my observations. You know, we talk about Lumina a lot. There are two aspects. One is called outcome focus, and the other is people focus. And people focus is more the green, the one-on-one, being a good listener, really caring about people and being compassionate. And then the other is red, being driven by process and task oriented, very direct. It's not personal, it's business. And of, this is very interesting. A lot of people that I've coached, they don't like in leadership roles, they don't like it when they're high in green. They
Wow.
like it when they're high in red.
Wow. And why
Yeah,
do you think that is, Cecilia? Why is
because
that
they think
happening?
they're too soft if they're high in green.
Right.
Yes, yes. And they've been conditioned, and I am very open to socializing this because I don't have concrete evidence, but this is just from what I've seen. There is this unspoken expectation that you need to deliver results. And when you have too much green, when you care too much about people, you compromise the drive to deliver results.
Wow, that's
But it works
interesting.
against leadership. It works against what we talk about. People come first, people deliver the work. Your job as a leader is not to create the results. Your job as a leader is to motivate the team and create the conditions for them to deliver the results. But thankfully, throughout my career, I've worked with a lot of leaders who shift and who see the value in developing the soft skills.
That's really, really interesting. And it's a conundrum, isn't it? Because when you're a leader, you hold the responsibility of achieving results. And I guess that's where the bully might come into play, is like, we just have to get it done. Just do
Yeah.
it, What's wrong with you?
And
So
markets are unpredictable. Jobs are being threatened, and I can see how workplaces can be very stressful when expectations are not met and results are not achieved. Then that pressure just gets pushed down the organization.
we've talked about this in previous podcasts in all of that research that's coming out of Gallup. We're seeing that leaders are being given less time, scope, or capacity to build those human skills, which is dropping in the productivity and results and outcomes and performance of teams. And if you think about it, when you've got the pressure and you don't have the time to build relationship, trust, and support your team to grow, all you can focus on is outcome. And what that means for the leader is, I just know what works for me and I know how it needs to be done. I don't have time to explore an innovative approach to an outcome. So I'm just going to tell you what you have to do, and I'm going to make sure that you're doing it that way. So people become micromanaged and pushed and pulled rather than an agile way of looking at things where we're going, we just have an outcome. Let's explore as a team and a collective how we can be adaptive, innovative, and agile to reach that outcome in a way that's going to allow the business and the organization to grow. Yeah, so I can understand how the leader can
There's a lot there. Yes,
yeah.
there's so much more to unpack there, but I think we'll leave it at that. I don't want to open up another topic because we're here to talk about person difficult personalities, and I think you already shared a lot of great tips and advice on what people can do. I I I know that if you are in one of those situations, it can be a nightmare. And just note that there are resources available. You can reach out to get support. And I would say and love to hear what your top advice is for someone like not someone who is as ill as Mary and it was in such a precarious position, but someone who's coming to you. What would be your top tips on how to get out of their situation?
I would say the trap is that people think it's them and it's just them and there's something wrong with me. And don't assume that that's the reality. Explore the alternatives and talk to somebody that you can trust. I would recommend ideally someone outside of the organization, whether it's a coach, a counselor, a trusted mentor, a colleague, someone else that can give you a outside perspective so that you feel more comfortable to be able to recognize that it's not just you, that there is
Mhm.
potentially something bigger going on.
Right, right. Yes, yes. I would say just look at your energy, look at where the energy is spent. And if it crosses a line where it's creating a lot of strife for you, it's time to really step back and manage yourself. Really focus on self-care.
Yes, yes. That
Regulate
ultimately,
your stress.
that's so important. At the end of the day, your own well-being is what is most important.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Well, this has been very insightful. Thank you so much, Barb. I've learned a
Very
lot.
deep.
Yeah. Yes. We never really know where these conversations take us. We always have such a great time talking about our personal experiences, and that yeah, I hope that this has been helpful. And please leave us your comments and questions on other topics that you're interested in hearing more about.